What up and welcome to Rama Screen YouTube channel, and here's my review of the brand new The Crow movie. Let's rock this. Okay, those of you who regularly follow me on Twitter may have recalled the fact that I had already watched this movie a month ago, even prior to San Diego Comic-Con. Yes, I was quite possibly the first person, other than the filmmakers themselves, to have actually seen this entire film before anybody else. And I tweeted about it and I got in trouble for it because the studio didn't like that I used the word reboot to describe it. They preferred reimagining, which is fine. Either way is cool, but let's keep it real. Let's keep it 100. It is a reboot. But yeah, and so I had to ultimately delete that tweet. But before I deleted it, the reactions online to my attending the early screening were insane. All y'all were like, how was the movie, Rama? Whoa, was it any good? So on and so forth. And at the time, I was not allowed to say much about what I saw. But now that the embargo has lifted, let's discuss it, shall we? Okay, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I really wanted to like this quote-unquote reimagining, but I'm sad to inform you that this new The Crow is more bad than good. I can't even call it a good bad movie because there are so many elements about it, including the dialogues, that are just so clunky. Not to mention a pretty boring beginning where it took forever for the movie to create the mood. Listen, you know me, I'm a huge fan of revenge movies. And the third act does provide a bloody graphic conclusion, albeit over the top, but the movie as a whole is just one big giant uneven mess. Directed by Rupert Sanders and written by Zach Baylin and William Schneider, based on James O'Barr's original graphic novel, in the new The Crow, soulmates Eric Draven and Shelly Webster are brutally murdered when the demons of her dark past catch up with them. Given the chance to save his true love by sacrificing himself, Eric sets out to seek merciless revenge on their killers, traversing the worlds of the living and the dead to put the wrong things right. Starring Bill Skarsgård, Danny Houston, FKA Twigs, Laura Byrne, Jordan Bolger, and Isabella Wei. I am a millennial, so I remember the Brandon Lee tragedy like it was yesterday. So I totally understand some of the pushback against this reimagining from the fans who think it's an abomination to introduce a new Eric Draven. But I'm not on that camp. Look, The Crow is not The Godfather. The Crow is not Back to the Future. It's not on that level. The Crow is not some kind of a national treasure cinema that can never be reintroduced to a new generation. Hell, we had a different Eric Draven in Mark Dacascos. Remember that show? So this whole idea of, ooh, stay away from Eric Draven, that belongs only to the late great Brandon Lee, is something that I wholeheartedly disagree with. Listen, some folks say that this is actually based on a different comic book by James O'Barr or a different art design of Eric Draven. And some say that this new Eric looks like a SoundCloud rapper. I don't know anything about all that since I don't read graphic novels in general and I don't listen to SoundCloud rap. But having seen this movie, I can tell you that this is one of those cases in which the stunts, the costumes, the hair and makeup, and the cinematography excel far better than the script, the directing, and the performances, all of which I consider to be subpar. And that's why I don't necessarily give this movie the lowest grade, because there's something that you can still admire and appreciate about the aesthetics of the film. You know, its stylized black ink drenched look, that dark gothic gloomy tone. I mean, the sets and the music and every other technical aspect about it, credit where credit is due. They did go out of their way to stay true to the bleak, primal nature of grief that the original adaptation delved into. Now, what do I think of Bill Skarsgård as the new Eric? I think this movie arrives way too soon after we just had his other movie, Boy Kills World, a few months earlier, which also dealt with similar themes of vengeance. Granted, his character on that one was mute, but when I was watching The Crow, all I could see is that same guy but with much heavier makeup on. Now, I don't think Bill takes on this role lightly. At the same time though, his performance is hindered by the poorly written script where he just keeps delivering the silliest lines. The same goes for his co-star FKA Twigs, who looks like she's just sleepwalking through much of this film. Bill and FKA's chemistry were sufficiently convincing, but to my point earlier, the way that on-screen relationship is structured often drags and drags and drags to the point where I kinda don't care what happens to them, which is probably not the response that the filmmakers would want. I'm also not too crazy about Danny Huston as the villain Vincent. He's pretty basic. Look, this is not Danny's first rodeo playing a bad guy in movies, obviously. In fact, he's been making a decent living off of this run, if you will. And the concept of his character, to a certain extent, is intriguing. His evil abilities, the mindfuckery that he can do to his victims. That said, he's also not potent enough, meaning I would have preferred it more if it was a villain who could equally physically go toe-to-toe with Eric. Especially since the third act sells itself as an aggressively violent reckoning, which it is. There's something oddly fun about seeing Eric pulling henchmen apart limb from limb. And so going through all that brutal, gratuitous ultra-violence without leading up to a rock'em sock'em final collision because the villain is anything but barking mad just feels like it all just ultimately falls and hits the floor with a thud. So yeah, overall I give The Crow the rating of 2 out of 5. And maybe I'm being too generous with that. Again, I wanted to like this reimagining, and as I implied earlier, there are technical aspects about it that we can admire, but at the end of the day, I just can't get myself to recommend this movie to you. This film may not end up as among this year's worst of the worst on my list, but it's definitely cutting it close.